Actually, already. You know what? I think I already did it. Can you hear me twice, Mike? Or Michael? Wow. I'm still not all there. Can you hear me twice, John?
No, I can only hear you once, and that's enough.
Oh, it's so enough. It is so enough. Well, hello and welcome, everyone. I hope that you're doing well. So, what that all about was, I thought last week when we did this, I had two microphones by accident because I've changed the way I do my scenes to make it a little better for you guys. So hopefully you don't see my screen flashing at you all the time. But as a result, it made poor John, who is not Michael, hear me twice. Which, I mean, that's never fun.
Nope.
So it sounds, but it looks like in the intervening week I actually fixed it, which is news to me because I wasn't aware I did anything. But my brain definitely has not. My brain hasn't been here, so I'm not surprised I did something and didn't know it. So John was the first one to chat, and John, I'm afraid I don't get your hint this week. Dolphins, bananas, burger?
Well, that's for a mystery category if you wanted to do that again.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, we'll see how. Gosh, we'll see how I do this. So I have been watching all of season 2 on like triple X speed. Going through it all, making notes, trying to decide what my top 3 favorite episodes were, my 1 least favorite episode, and my top Darwin moments. Now,
it's a tough one because there's so many.
Well, actually, it was a tough one because there weren't many Darwin moments this season.
Well, not as many as the first season, it's true.
Like Darwin made appearances this season, but he did not. He didn't have any like, here's what's going on. This episode is really involving Darwin in some form or fashion. It's like he came in, made a comment, and then left. And I have to wonder. You mentioned that at one point in the season they sent it off for repairs. I wonder if they're just having issues kind of the whole filming season with Darwin.
It could be.
In terms of favorites, I had a hard time just like last season. As I made my notes, I put things into good categories, middling categories, and bad categories. And I definitely had a lot of middling episodes where there's nothing bad about it. Maybe a little too action-packed sometimes. Maybe, just kind of things happen, but it wasn't an episode you go, oh, wow, that was an amazing addition to Sci-Fi right there. They just kind of existed. But there's still so many good episodes. And in terms of bad, I think I only had 2 actually bad episodes on my count. So I almost had a real hard time choosing my least favorite episode, but as it was, it turned out where it worked out just fine. And yes, Thomas, there's a little too much land quest this season.
Yes, I'd agree with that.
If you have a show called SeaQuest, you kind of expect it's going to take a little bit in the sea every once in a while. But hey to Josh Street, how you doing? He wants to know where the new host Life with Amy is, because I have been just so bad about arriving here on time. I believe my dear wife is actually putting my 2 oldest to bed right now. I got them in bed, but she's actually getting them to sleep. And this is a thing I tell her all the time. Like, humble brag. I cut my own hair. It shouldn't be a humble brag. It's just as I was about to say it, I'm like, well, that sounds like you're tooting your own horn. But anyway, I cut my hair, but I always have Amy come in and make sure it all looks nice. And she's like, I don't know why you have me do this. Well, I can do 90% of it, but you're the one who makes it look nice. I can give myself a haircut and people will go, oh gosh, who gave Matt the scissors? But she comes in and she does those few tweaks that makes it actually presentable. I mean, no one's going, wow, you're amazing, but it at least doesn't make people go, wow, you're horrible. And that is what I aim for in life.
Yeah, there's so many other reasons to do that.
Yes, I shoot for the middling path, just like this season did. I know great is too much to expect, but if I can hit middle, that that is my comfort zone. Oh gosh. Aravic Sonder, how are you doing tonight? Jilon True, all cells are final, as the Ferengis would say. I'm pretty sure. That's what I'm making their catchphrase. We'll see if it takes off. Multi-Gunman, glad that you are here. It's just going fine. Had a fun evening. So I'm wrapping up my work day. It's about 4 o'clock. So I say wrapping up, but I'm in like the final hour of my work day. And I hear the door slam downstairs. And, you know, you get sixth senses whenever you're a father. And as soon as I heard that door slam, I was like, something's wrong here. Like it didn't sound any different from any number of door slams I've heard in my life. But something about this one, it sounded wrong. So I come downstairs and I find that my son is screaming, my oldest. And Amy looks very panicked. And of course, I'm very calm and collected. I just want to know what's going on, make sure everything's okay, which may or may not be a bold-faced lie, because I knew something was wrong anyway. And it turned out that Aiden had slammed his finger in the door. And, you know, he must have got it right on the nail bed, because it was bleeding a good amount. And so I quickly got dressed, you know, like, not like I was naked. I was about to say. Oh gosh, I don't know why I choose some of the words I do sometimes. I quickly got, by dress I mean like I put on my socks and shoes. I don't know why that doesn't count as dress the rest of the time, but I got my socks and shoes on, and you know, I'm like, okay, I'm looking up ERs that we can go to, like urgent care, because it looked like he got it pretty good, and he was really freaking out about it. So gave him some ibuprofen, the little liquid stuff to kill the pain, ice pack, looking up stuff, put on Avatar The Last Airbender cartoon, not the movie, never the movie. Just kind of, you know, because you know how kids are. Whenever they see something bad, their minds work it up into something worse. And so I'm like, I just need him to calm down long enough to figure out if this is fractured or broken, or if it's nothing. And thankfully, long story short, it ended up being nothing. But it definitely ended up being a very interesting way to start the evening and end the workday.
I'm glad he's all right.
Yes, me too. So that's how I'm doing Multi-Gunman. It was high octane for about 20 minutes, and then a nice peaceful evening. Thomas Potts is here. He's saying that I'm late. I was like right on time. So I'm not sure why you're saying that. Is it the time zone change thing? I know there's some issues last night and tonight, perhaps. But no, I started on time, 9:30 p.m. U.S. Central Daylight Savings Time, at least until we fall back, and then it's going to be 9:30 p.m. Central Time. The end. No daylight. All right, and Professor Brainy Specs is here as well. How you doing, Professor Brainy Specs? Glad that you are able to join us tonight. I don't think my wife does an amazing job. No, Professor, I literally think my wife is what makes it amazing. The fact that she cut my hair, and then we had kids. And so the fact that I've been able to get the job 90% done and only need her for like 3 to 5 minutes, I'm very thankful for. Because every week I have to cut my hair. It grows so stupidly fast. And if I was going to a barber each week or every other week just to stretch things out, I'd be paying so much money. So I'm very thankful that we can do it ourselves. Josh is saying that he was lucky. My friend's little sister, when she was 7, her tip of her finger was cut off when she slammed the door on her finger. Ooh.
Ouch.
Ooh, that hurts. Interestingly, my son, this is the second time he's really gotten himself at the door. He was, you know, we always tell him, don't play with the doors, don't play with the doors. And then he and his brother were playing with the door to the pantry. And he got real good. And I think we did go to the doctor for that one. Because he got real good. And he was, you know, like a year or 2 younger than he is now. And he wasn't able to bend it. Oh, it's his middle finger. So he's been walking around flipping us off all evening. Like, look at my finger, Dad. I'm like, yes, I see it. Please. I'm like, just let it go, Matt. He's 8. He doesn't need to understand the finer mechanics of colorful metaphors.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm Multi Gunman. Amy, give me a hacksaw, rubbing alcohol, and soldering gun ASAP. We've got ourselves a situation here. I am currently driving my wife bonkers, which, you know.
What else is new?
Yeah. But I've had like just the weirdest neck pain for a little over a week now. And she's like, you need to go to a doctor. And even before COVID, I was never pro doctor. So I'm like, look, what are they going to do? They're going to give me an ice pack and some ibuprofen, which I can do at homes. And I think the bigger issue is I just keep sleeping in on it wrong. So I don't want to go. I don't want to go. Professor Brainspecs is saying that I said Amy isn't amazing. That doesn't sound like what I said. That sounds like the opposite of what I would say. But no, Thomas, I do not work in the nude. At most, I work in jeans and just like a white t-shirt that I can throw a nice collared shirt on whenever I need to. Like that's the most relaxed I get, having to work from home all the time. Hey, Super Bloodpuss, you are here just in time because we are going to transition from Talkin' Shop to Talkin' SeaQuest. So, John, do you want to start with our top 3 favorite episodes or our least favorite episode?
We can start with the 3 favorites. That works for you.
Sure. So, what was your, just randomly, what was one of your favorite episodes?
One of the favorites I picked was Dagger Redux, which is closer to the end of the season. You know, the daggers were set up in the season premiere. But in this episode, they bring Mariah back because she was the one who led the uprising. Well, the other ones at the end of the episode.
I'm sorry, hold on.
Peacefully.
Owen, is that you? Owen, do you need something, little son? Run off. Sorry, my office door suddenly opened and I saw a small hand for a moment. My apologies. I may be chasing that small hand down the hallway momentarily. It may have also been my daughter. Yes, it is. It is my middle child, my Owen. He seems to be quite pleased with himself right now. He's laughing about something. We'll see if he comes back here. Owen? Busted. Hopefully he's going to get his mom. Hopefully his mom is watching right now and she's like, oh, well, I can jump in here and intervene. I do apologize. So you're talking about Dagger Redux.
Yes. Talking about there is Mariah, who is the dagger who led the uprising, whereas the rest of the daggers seems to transition into normal society. But she had ended up in prison for leading the revolt.
Mm-hmm.
So in this episode, it opens up with someone who looks like Commander Ford breaking her out. But it turns out just to be an android of some type. Another feature of this episode is that one of the reasons I picked it as my favorite is that it focuses on O'Neill a lot. I tend to like the episodes that place more of an emphasis on character development, and this was definitely an O'Neill episode. He's at the beginning, he's not happy with the way his career's been going.
Come here, you. Come here. What are you doing out of bed? Now you can see my son here is only a floating head. He has nothing else. I thought this was pretty impressive. Owen, you want to tell us all what you're doing up right now? You're wanting me?
Yeah.
Okay. So as you can see, I'm doing a YouTube thing right now.
You mean live?
Yeah, I am doing a live. That's right. This is my friend John. Say hi, John.
Hi, John.
So, hey, I'm gonna need you to head back to bed, or if you really, really need something, you can head downstairs and ask Mommy for help. Okay? Okay. Now look out for all the wires. Daddy has a crazy experiment going on right now. Can you close the office door quietly? Thank you, Owen. Night night.
And yes, Thomas Matthew sure did a good job putting the kids to bed.
Oh yes, that was I think that was one of my finer achievements right there. Oh gosh, everyone, my middle child, he is quiet and precocious.
Yes, he's here all week.
In fact, okay, real quick, funny story. So we always talk about how my oldest he's a very cute boy. Ever since he was born, people just talk about, oh, he's so cute, he's so cute. And then Owen, he never liked being called cute. And so what we recognize is that he has very, very handsome eyes, just deep, dark brown. We always talk about, oh, you're such a handsome boy. And so the other day he was taking a bath and he was keep throwing his feet up in the air. And so his head is down way too close to the water. I'm like, son, please pick up your head. I need to be able to see that cute little head as you take a bath. And he goes, Dad, my head is handsome, not cute. And he just has like this extremely dry, extremely British sense of humor. Oh gosh. So John, please, by all means, continue.
Okay, take 3. Talking about O'Neill. He's
Yes.
not satisfied with the way his life and his career has been going. He's unburdening himself to Darwin, who everyone knows is the best counselor on the ship. But so he decides, after some soul searching, he's just going to quit.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to go off on some beach town and paint people, read literature and all that kind of stuff. So he's going to resign, but the Captain Bridger says, "No, I don't want you to resign, but I'll give you 30 days off to figure things out."
Mm-hmm.
So there's that going on at the same time. We have Mariah's meeting up with Matthew's doppelganger, who has this evil plan to use fossilized bugs as a power source, and he wants to mine it, but he's not allowed to mine it. So he wants to work with Mariah to destroy the SeaQuest, because SeaQuest would be the biggest threat to his operations.
Mm-hmm.
So as they go on from there, he gives Mariah this fancy automated sub. They go after SeaQuest, and she captures O'Neill to get some kind of code so she can sneak up on the SeaQuest. And when they finally meet, she gets the drop on the SeaQuest, and Bridger is injured, so Ford has to take command. But even though SeaQuest is damaged by the sneak attack, he manages to outmaneuver her, and ultimately she's defeated. But in the end, she gets to escape because she trades her freedom for sending O'Neill back.
Yes,
Who
because
finally realizes
O'Neill was painting women. Like he wanted to, like, this is what I'm going to do with my life. I can't be on SeaQuest, so I'm just going to paint women. Poorly, as it turned out.
Well, yes. So, but then he finally gets back, and he's laying in sickbay with Bridger, who had got a concussion. And as they're both recovering, he realizes of what he missed. So I guess he's going to be happy to give SeaQuest another try.
Mm-hmm. That was a good episode. I kind of had it, like, it just barely fell into my middling episodes. But it was really just for a nitpicky reason on my part. And that was the concept of your main baddie being a scientist who got spurned from the scientific community because his ideas could never work, even though his ideas 100% worked. And it's like, what do you mean his ideas won't work? He literally, like, can show proof of everything working, and it's still like, oh no, that could never work. So that just one. Sometimes I'm too nitpicky, but that one little nitpick is what did it for me. But I full-heartedly agree that Bridger got a lot of great moments to command this season, and the way that it seems like they gave him those great moments really revolved around his interaction with the crew. Like, you had especially this one with O'Neill. You had another time with Lewis, who wanted to go off and follow the girl of his dreams in another episode, which I guess that kind of made my good list. It was the everything nice. But in that you actually see Bridger. He's like, I just want to leave. I just want to be with this girl forever. We instantly clicked, and he gets great advice from many people. He gets advice from Piccolo that you're being silly. He gets advice from Bridger about you being silly. He gets advice from B'Elanna Troy about you being silly, although, I mean, she kind of does it poorly. And she's kind of out of her depth as a counselor. She's more the bioengineer person. She's the one who, when you were introduced to her, she went through about 5 PhDs that she held, and it's like, okay, you're the one who, anytime there's something that someone needs to know, it's going to be you. But I'm glad they didn't go that way with her character. It seems like they backpedaled a bit on what she really was able to do throughout the series, or throughout this season, I should say.
Yeah, one thing that made me chuckle about that episode is that I think she gets a little offended that O'Neill didn't come to talk to her. It seemed like he got advice from just about everybody else except her. And making his decision. He talked to Darwin, he talked to Bridger, he talked to Dagwood, and so on. But he never went to B'Elanna Troy.
I don't blame him, but yes, you're exactly right. Yeah. She did get very offended. Especially she got offended that Bridger, without consulting her, had given him a 30-day leave of absence. Like, no, I'm not accepting resignation. Just take 30 days. And she's like, how dare you do that? How dare you let him become a beach bum? He's like, because I'm not letting him become a beach bum. I'm giving him 30 days, which he has fully earned, to get his mind straight. Because, in one of the episodes, which was one of my bad episodes, they really forgot what the characters could do. Specifically O'Neill. Like, they forgot that he was a master linguist for some reason in this episode. And like they don't just address it like, oh, I don't know this language. It's like, oh, he's not even on the charts of being a linguist. But in this episode, the Dagger Redux, it really was nice to see Tim wrestling with the fact that he is surrounded by a lot of great guys. I mean, James Brody was introduced as this guy who led this amazing commando team and he's rescued someone or did an insertion somewhere. But he's just this amazing commando type person. And then Ford is an excellent commander. He really could have been given the SeaQuest in terms of capability. The only reason he wasn't given the SeaQuest is because they wanted to de-escalate the SeaQuest from being a military vessel into more of a scientific / military vessel, kind of like the Enterprise. And they needed that person who could bridge the gap. But and then so you got Brody, you got Ford, you have Lewis, who's just a child genius. And that was one of the best parts. After he has his counseling session with Darwin, he goes on to run into Henderson and Lewis in the hallway, and Henderson's just gushing about Lewis, like, oh, he's won this award, and he's being featured in this magazine, and Lewis is being shy and bashful, but Tim's like, oh my goodness, everyone is so good. So I did enjoy that episode because O'Neill is a character that could very easily fall into the background of a series like this. Because I mean, he'd be like that guy that you walk up and Geordi replaces him at the helm for season 1. He's the guy that gets replaced by a senior member who's more interesting when they walk on bridge, But I love the fact that they've taken so many episodes to give O'Neill a spotlight. Like, this episode was his biggest spotlight, bar none. But they've given him just ample time, and honestly, they've given him ample time usually surrounding his faith and talking about how much his faith has shaped who he is, and they've always done it very respectfully. You've had characters who, I can't forget if it was in this season or in season 1. I want to say it was this season because I think Brody was the one who did it. There was some situation going on, and Brody, while expressing that he doesn't believe in a higher power, recognized that O'Neill did and asked O'Neill to pray on his behalf. Because, I mean, anyone in a foxhole believes in God, as the saying goes. When there's shells landing all around you, there's bullets flying over your head, it turns out that everyone in the foxhole suddenly becomes perhaps not a Christian, but at the very least a theist. So yeah, excellent choice. Excellent choice for.
Thank you.
So I guess I have so many good options here. I didn't get a chance to really narrow it down to 3, but I think I will choose And Everything Nice as one of my favorite episodes for the season. So in Everything Nice, you had Piccolo and Ortiz and Dagwood and Lewis all out on the town. And, you know, Piccolo's making some comment about how great it is to swim, and the rest of them like do this motion like, yeah, we get it. You just talk nonstop about how amazing gills are. We love your gills. Yes. And I love that kind of behind the scenes stuff. They do it behind his back because it shows that these people aren't just working together. They're actually having fun working together. It's a dynamic we got a lot in, you know, phase 1 and phase 2 of Star Trek. I say phase 1, Gen 1 and Gen 2. Because it turns out phase 2 was something that almost happened, and I didn't know that, so I don't want to confuse anyone. TOS, TNG, DS9, Voyager, Enterprise, where they weren't just coworkers, they weren't just people who served aboard a ship together. They actually had respect for one another, and they actually liked one another. Even Bones and McCoy, wow, even McCoy and Spock, they had a friendship. Like, yes, they got on each other's nerves. Yes, they kind of had this prod each other dynamic. But at the end of the day, they were still friends. They still liked each other. And I love to see that in this episode. And I also love that it's just a throwaway opening skit. And yet they did so much with it where they go in somehow. You know, some guy walked up to Piccolo and gave him an envelope. We didn't see this happen, but we're told he handed this envelope that was four tickets for a free VR experience. So you put on the helmet and you get to experience anything from your own mind. Like, it's not that they have assets on hand. It's that somehow this takes place in your own mind and you get to live out your fantasy. And so we first see Piccolo, and he's rocking out on stage. And like, okay, yeah, this is typical wish fulfillment stuff. You're a rock star. And then the camera pans over and you see Ortiz. And Ortiz is in the antebellum South. Like, you would not have thought this at all. Like, he's totally dressed up in this Gone with the Wind outfit. I'm pretty sure Henderson was dressed up in there also. Which, I mean, makes it even better because later on in one of my almost bad but not bad episodes, you had the where Henderson and the pop star and Ortiz all had this love triangle going on, and she kissed him and he rejected her because he's like, this isn't appropriate. And so I love the fact that those two scenes exist because we see that even though he fantasized about having this relationship, at the same time that was just a daydream fantasy. It's not something he really wanted, and he actually respected her in both of their positions enough that when he had the opportunity to cash in on some of that fantasy, he rejected it, which I thought was a great thing for Ortiz. And then Dagwood's just, chilling there with Darwin. But you see O'Neill.
That was the best one.
O'Neill is running the SeaQuest with Bridger being O'Neill, tapping away furiously at the keyboard. It was great. I just loved it so much. They make a great rat pack. The four of them. You got so many great moments from those four characters. And honestly, I think they did a great job with Ortiz this season overall. That he existed last season, but this season they really fleshed him out, and it was well done. So after they have this experience, Lewis, you don't see his fantasy because he tries to hit it up with the girl at the front desk because she was reading some advanced textbook. And at first she shoots him down, but she later apparently takes him back to her apartment. Like, before he can even get to the fantasy place, she takes him back to her place and they talk. You find out that her dad is some big scientist, and she ends up getting kidnapped after that. So Lewis he's ready to resign. Piccolo tells Piccolo, and who up to this point we're like, yeah, he's the rebellious one. He's the, brain out in outer space kind of person. But he actually was really mature, and he's like, yeah, you feel this way. You feel like, she completes your senses. You feel like she just is your other half. I get it, but you're being stupid. You need to take the time to actually get to know this girl before you throw away everything that you've worked hard to achieve. And then Bridger and Belana Troy are doing the same song and dance. And Bridger, he has the same thing, but he says it obviously in a much more mature way, because he's more mature than Piccolo is. Piccolo talks like a big brother would. Bridger talks like your dad would. And Bridger's like, look, if you really love this girl and she really loves you, take your tour of duty. In a month, you'll come back. And if it's really meant to be, she's still going to be there waiting for you. You're infatuated. Take the time to get to know her. And he says, no. And so Lewis, he goes back to her place and she finds it's ransacked. There's kind of a Columbo type police officer there waiting for him, and gives him this pin. He's like, do you know what this is? Oh, no, I have no idea. Ask him some questions. It turns out the pin is a traveling lie detector, which I wish we got to see more of this cop character this season. You can't do too many cop episodes, because then it starts to become a police procedural show instead of SeaQuest. But I would have loved to see more of this Columbo-esque character, or at the very least, I would have loved to see at the end of the episode, you see him use it 3 times. Once with Lewis, once with Bridger, and once with Piccolo. I would have loved to see Piccolo call him out on it, because they set it up. His partner is like, well, how long are you going to do this trick? And the Columbo character is like, well, I'm going to pull the trick of handing them my pin and then asking for it back and doing a lie detector test on them until it doesn't work anymore. I would have loved to see Piccolo be like, well, yeah, that's a good trick, but I mean, your lie detector isn't going to tell you anything different than I already told you. But so anyway, they're kind of curious why Lewis got involved with her. Her dad is someone famous. He leaves the apartment finally, and we find a letter waiting for him. We find out that she was kidnapped. He goes to meet the kidnappers and gets kidnapped himself. So she's being held captive, and they reveal that they want him to give them the codes to SeaQuest, the command codes. So just like Kirk would do, he wanted to know what the command codes were to take full control of the SeaQuest. So he does it, but it's like a little more complicated than that. He actually has to go physically to the SeaQuest, get a computer chip, and then with the chip and the code together, it would give them control. So he comes back, he's like, now I want to see whatever the girl's name was. And it turns out she was working with them. She was never kidnapped. This was all a movement done by her dad, because he thought that the world wasn't responding to his demands. I think they were eco-terrorists almost.
Something like that.
And so they put in the chip, and instead of it giving them control of the SeaQuest, Lewis, and some great foresight, actually reprogrammed it just to send out a 911 call on the UEO channels, stating his name and where he was at. And so with this, Brody comes in, saves the day, Lewis is rescued, and the girl says, I'm sorry, Lewis, I never meant to hurt you like this. It's just, we're just the same. You followed your heart, I followed mine. It's just, we went 2 different directions. And Lewis, at the beginning of the episode, he might have fallen for a line like this, but having some time to actually think clearly, he's like, you're full of crap. No, we're nothing alike. And he's right. Just because 2 people follow their hearts doesn't mean you're the same. Following your heart does not make people identical. And so that was a really well done episode. I love that it focused on Lewis so much. Anytime it's focusing on Lewis, it's usually a good episode. And it really, you really felt for Lucas. He gets there, he falls in love with the girl, just to find out that she's a lying backstabber. And I feel like there might be a lot of guys who can have that storyline really resound with you. That the girl
resonate with them even.
Yeah, resonate. That the girl you thought you'd spend your life with ended up being a lying, cheating, backstabbing, adjective, colorful metaphor, as you will, type personality. That was my first of my favorite. And let's see, have we really missed anything going on over in the chat? Josh Tree is saying I should forget season 3 of SeaQuest and go straight to Babylon 5. No, we're going to finish all 3 seasons. But look, season 3 is 14 episodes. It's not going to be a long season.
And speaking of Babylon 5, there's some estimates about how many names on Babylon 5 you could write, and the current estimate is less than 1.
Yes, that's true. I don't know a single character's name from Babylon 5. If you said five names and had one of them be from Babylon 5, I think I might have a 25% chance of getting it right. Which to say, I'm at least distantly aware of some of the names, and I think maybe I'd be triggered to like, oh hey, yeah, that's one I recognize. So it'd be slightly better than 20, which would just be guessing blindly. So 25, maybe even 30% chance of guessing 1 out of 5 names correctly. Robert wants to know, which version of Piccolo am I talking about? King Piccolo, Kid Piccolo, early DBZ Piccolo, or later DBZ Piccolo, or DBZ Super Piccolo? No, we're talking about the SeaQuest Piccolo, the one with the gills. So John, what's one of your second favorite episodes here?
Another episode I picked was Dead End. And in this episode, a shuttle with Henderson, O'Neill, Brody, and Lucas is pulled into some kind, sort of like a underwater sinkhole. They're pulled into this tunnel after they picked up a distress call from a missing explorer. And while they're stuck in these tunnels together, they have to find a way to cobble together enough parts from their 2 ships, hopefully get out before this boiling water apparently comes back, and also they run out of air. So, and of course, meanwhile, SeaQuest is outside trying to figure out what happened to them. And for some reason, there's a giant sandworm crawling around in the tunnels underneath the surface. But in the main part of the episode that I was interested in was, there's these 4 people from SeaQuest, plus this other explorer called Marcus. And there's a lot you get to focus on the characters of O'Neill. Like they deal with his faith again. Like when there's not enough room for everybody, and they think they're gonna have to leave somebody behind. He offers to be the one that stays behind because he has faith. So he knows where he's going if he dies. So you want to give everybody else a chance to go out. But then they decide to draw straws basically, and it actually ends up on Lucas. And he says, well, that's what the math says, and then when they try to say, oh, let's do it again. But nope, they got me. So it's perfectly fair. So I'm just going to have to deal with it. And, so he's obviously upset that he's going to die, but he's basically going to go through with it. So the others have a chance of escaping. But when the time comes, it's the explorer Marcus decides to stay behind because he feels guilty for basically luring them in with his distress call. So they managed to launch the pod and get out just in time for SeaQuest to rescue them, because Darwin had been on to look for them, and he detected an area where the salt content was different. So the SeaQuest got there just in time to rescue them. But Lucas feels guilty that Marcus got left behind, so he runs off, grabs the stinger, and Dagwood decides to go with him. So they rush back in and then save the guy, and everybody gets out safe and sound. And SeaQuest gets to blow up one of those worm things.
Very fun. I did love the way that episode started with the 4 of them, the Brody, Ford, Henderson, and Lucas having attended a sexual harassment seminar, and Henderson failing it. The only girl.
The woman was the one who failed.
And she made some sassy comment like, if someone stops your butt, you hit him in the family jewels or something like that. Apparently that was not the right answer for the situation, which I disagree. If someone tries to get fresh with a girl, I think the girl absolutely should express her displeasure as clearly and decisively as possible. But I understand why the Navy, the UEO, technically would have different standards. But other than that, it was a good episode. It was also in one of my high up there episode ranking lists. Mainly, I really like the idea that it wasn't just pew pew lasers. There were a lot of middling episodes that was just we go somewhere and we pew 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 action adventure. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just season 1 of SeaQuest really spoiled me, and so whenever it came up in season 2, it did lower the bar a little bit for me in terms of how good the episode was. So I love that this episode really focused on how do you fairly pick. If someone had to die, how does it work? And then also just kind of wrestling with the grief that comes from accepting the choice. I think it says a lot about Lewis's personality, where he stood his ground and he didn't try to take the out people gave him. When the time came, he wasn't trying to, claw his way aboard the ship. He accepted it. He was ready to die, fully ready to die. He accepted the fact that this was democratic, and the alternative was that we all die. It wasn't that maybe we make it to the top. Maybe if Henderson and Lewis just really hold their breath on the journey up, they might make it. It was no. Either one of us dies or all of us die. And he recognized that it was better to have done a democratic, blind solution to the issue rather than, trying to be like, well, obviously Henderson can't die because she's a woman and you got to protect women. Obviously Lewis can't die because he's a child and he is a civilian. Obviously the red shirt guy, the guy who sent out the distress call, he's also civilian, so he can't die. So really, it's just between Ford and Brody. Now, obviously, Ford can't die because has seniority and he's a minority. All right, was
O'Neill and Brody?
O'Neill was there? Okay, yes, you're right.
O'Neill and Brody.
Okay, so yeah, so Brody would have had seniority. So they didn't try to. They didn't try and do it that way. They said, nope, it's going to be 100% fair, 100% just blind luck. And I think that was great. And seeing how everyone reacted to that, I think made for a great episode.
And there was one line from Marcus when he was saying that he was going to stay behind, where Lucas was saying, well, the math decided that, I was the one to go. And they were talking about the math says that there's not enough air. But Marcus says, I prefer free will to mathematics. That I think that you can only trust, and the math is cold, hard facts, but the human element can trump that in a situation like this.
And that honestly is something SeaQuest does so well time and time again, is that they both look at the cold math, and then they also look at and respect the religious counterpoint, which is just really amazing in the fact that during this time, like the early 90s, there was a bit of it was kind of when the freedom from religion movement was at its peak, I feel like. I'm probably undoubtedly a little bit wrong on the exact year freedom from religion really had its most successful time. But at the very least, the late 80s, early 90s was kind of a heyday for that. And only in the mid 90s did kind of the new age religion become acceptable again. Then you got things like DS9 with the wormhole aliens and the Bajorans all having these very new agey kind of religious ceremonies. And then of course you had Chakotay doing his pseudo Indian new age stuff. But just an unbiased, like, you know what? There's a lot of Christians in the world, and you need to if you're going to reflect reality, you need to reflect the fact that there are a lot of Christians out there. And hey, look, here's O'Neill, and he has Christian beliefs. And oh, hey, they've run into someone who, while having Christian beliefs, he still has faith. He still believes that there's something greater than himself. Free will, as he put it. So I think SeaQuest just did that so well, time and time again. Thomas Potts has mentioned that Babylon 5 treats religion in a biased way. At least I feel like that. What was religion
unbiased? You mean?
An unbiased. Well, see, I was gonna say what little I remember about the things I've heard about Babylon 5 is that religion does play, like the different races definitely have their religions. Is that accurate?
I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen very much of it.
Okay. Well, from what Professor, Professor Thomas, y'all can let me know, but doesn't each race have, or each race, each alien race, don't they each have kind of their own, okay, Professor's saying it's accurate. So I might say that that's kind of biased in favor of religion, showing that much religion on screen. I don't know. We'll see when it comes to it, but I do get what you're saying overall, Thomas, that religion existed and they weren't for or against it. It existed, and that's how life is. While a individual might be pro or anti-religion, an entire sci-fi series shouldn't be pro or anti-religion. Unless you're just making like a Christian sci-fi series, in which case, yeah, it's gonna be pro-religion, and it should be. But if you're just making a run-of-the-mill sci-fi series, I really don't think that politics or religion is something that should play a super predominant role. Not unless it's like something dystopian, in which case, yeah, politics is going to be a factor. Anyway, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. And yes, Thomas, that's the power of math. Power. So, one of my other favorite episodes, it's my number 2, not number 2 overall, but just number 2 that I'm going to mention here, is Vapors. And I'll say this. I had a hard time choosing between When We Dead Awaken and Vapors, because both of them feature one of the characters meeting up with his mom, the mom being young for some reason, and them having to deal with that. So and When We Dead Awaken instance, it was James Brody. He thought his mom has died. It turned out that she had just been in cryogenic suspension, and she had insisted that even though there was no cure available, she wanted to see her son all grown up. So have her come out of cryosleep and meet her son. So she did, and didn't tell him. Spent the whole night talking to him, never mentioned that she was his mom. And then, adventures ensue from that. The reason why I thought that one was just a tiny, tiny bit worse than Vapors is because Vapors literally came like 2 or 3 episodes before it. And so it felt like a rehash instead of being able to stand alone on itself. Like there's no that's unfair on my part. It's 100% unfair. But the fact that the 2 episodes share the same kind of mom dynamic really was a detractor for When We Dead Awaken. So the point with Vapors, and one of the other reasons about this is Vapors is one of the early episodes of SeaQuest in the season. And we get to learn so much about Piccolo. It really was the first episode that focused on Piccolo. And in the episode, we also get the beginning of the Dagwood, Piccolo, and Lewis trio dynamic, which just anytime you get the 3 of them together, it was always a ton of fun. And of course, you got to hear some ska music. That was always a plus. But the episode revolves around Piccolo getting a phone call from his dad. He doesn't want to take it. He doesn't want to go help him because his dad's a bum. And we get to see that Lewis actually has grown. He had his own father issues, but he's been learning about it. He's been overcoming it. And so Lewis is actually doing better with his own father at this point. And, and counsels Piccolo to go ahead and engage with his dad because he understands the rough dynamic life, and he thinks he should do it anyway. So Piccolo goes, brings Lewis along with them so he doesn't do anything stupid, and they kind of pick up Dagwood along the way, and they go to this bar type place. There's a young lady who's giving Lewis kind of some flirty eyes and kind of some less flirty eyes toward Piccolo for some reason. Seems to be antagonistic toward Piccolo, and of course it's revealed as time goes on that that's his mom, so it just feels awkward around him. But his dad is in like this area that you have to be in order to smoke. Like smokers are confined to this one glass chamber, and it's like this filled up with cigar smoke kind of chamber because they don't even bother giving them fans apparently. It's hey, you want to mess up your life with cigars and cigarettes, fine, but we're not going to do anything to actually help you.
We're going to speed it along a little bit.
What's that?
We're going to speed it along a little bit by putting you all together in this room.
Yeah. Thomas says his mom didn't do romantic eyes to him. No, she did romantic eyes to Lewis, but whenever Piccolo looked over at her, she kind of looked away real quick, kind of like embarrassed or not wanting him to recognize him. So they go over and they find out from the dad that the mom... well, at first the dad doesn't say what he needs. First, he's being real squirrely about the whole thing. Piccolo's ready to leave. Lewis counsels him to go back in. Dagwood has just been standing there staring at the dad the whole time because he's fascinated by this. He has no father. And so whenever he sees other crew members interacting with their parents, he always really hones in on it. It like really, really draws him in. And so Piccolo comes back. He's like, okay, what do you want, Dad? And the dad wants him to go to this playground they used to play at and pull up this box. And the box is, we find out, full of these pills that the mom is using in order to somehow magically appear young. Which, what's going on with this? And at the same time, we have two other plot lines. Was it just two? Let's see. So we had the main plot line with Piccolo here. At the same time, You had a plot line going on with Ford, Brody, and Ortiz, where they are trying to pick up some chicks. And, they're out on a jet boat, and Ortiz is like, what about them? What about them? And the whole time, for some reason, Ford and Brody are like, no, there's not something wrong with that one. Something wrong with that one. And Ortiz is like, the sun is going down. We haven't picked up a single woman yet. We've been driving around in this boat for hours. I'm done. Y'all have fun. I'm going to go pick up some ladies. And he literally jumps off the boat and, swims ashore. So you had that plot line. Then you had a plot line with Bridger and B'Elanna Troy, where they're kind of exploring the idea of, are we going to start dating? Which was really weird because you found out in the first episode that Bridger dated B'Elanna's mom 30 years ago. It's like that's an automatic no. First of all, you have the rule where, how young can you date someone? You have to divide your age in half, then add 7 or 12 or something like that. So she'd be way outside the acceptable dating range to begin with. But then you add in, and you dated her mom. That's like, no, you're way beyond acceptable. Just don't even go there. So you had Piccolo's, you had Brody's, you had Bridger's, and then you also had Henderson and O'Neill. And Henderson and O'Neill were dating, or at least going on a date. And the whole time, O'Neill was just extremely uncomfortable with it. He liked Henderson, thought she was cute, but just the idea of being with her on the boat and everyone teasing him, he just couldn't stand that idea. So such that by the end, they get out of this movie where we find out in the future, they literally throw debris at you in movie theaters. Like they want the whole immersion. So they're seeing, was it a Jaws movie they were seeing? That might have been a little too on the nose. That might have been too on the nose. But they at least saw some sort of movie like that. And so they come out drenched because, there was a storm scene. So they're throwing water at you. And as they're throwing water, they're also throwing random trash at you to make it seem more immersive. And Henderson thought it was great. She thinks the ice cream is great. She thinks the paintings were great. And O'Neill makes a comment. It's like, yeah, that's great. You're great. And she gets that he's being sassy. It's like, that was rude. And he goes, no, if I said that your taste in movies was infantile, that would be rude. And she like comes up and smiles sweetly at him and shoves her ice cream in his face, which again, appropriate response. If you're going to be rude to a lady and she has food in her hands, don't be surprised if that ends up on your face. So you had these multiple plot lines going around, and that was another reason I enjoy this episode. You saw these great vignettes of each one's life, and the only real negative going over the episode is that it really felt like it should have been the season finale. Obviously, it couldn't be the season finale with what we actually got, but it felt like it should have been a season finale. Because you get to the end, Ford and Brody show up stag to the event. They couldn't find any ladies. Ortiz shows up with 2 girls. Everyone's having fun. Piccolo resolved his plotline. It turned out that the drug the mom was taking was a plant poison or insecticide, something like that. And what it was actually doing was it was eating her up from the inside out, so that all the skin was being pulled, was being stretched thin across her body. So it made her look young because all the wrinkles were gone. And because, maybe if you had a couple extra pounds, that would have been eaten away by the pill. But, Piccolo confronted her. She said she wouldn't do it anymore. The dad swore he changed his life around. So they all go to the party. Piccolo's, he turns out he's a great pianist. He's having fun there with Dagwood and Lewis. They resolve the B'Elanna Bridger plotline with, we'll just be friends. B'Elanna thought about leaving for a little while. You got to see some of her psychic powers and how just being around too many people, she would actually pick up stray thoughts. And they got rid of these powers with B'Elanna kind of early on. But one of the early ideas was that being on the surface was almost painful for a psychic. There was too much human static, and they had to get below the ocean where it could be like a natural EM buffer type thing. So all in all, we got to learn so much about each character. We got time to focus on each character. They had fun plot lines, and it's just one of those ones where you get to the end of the episode and you're like, well, that was a real fun episode. So I enjoyed Vapors quite a bit. So John, what was the third of your favorite?
The third one that I picked was The Sincerest Form of Flattery. In the opening of that episode, an experimental sub is getting some new program downloaded, but there's a mistake, and the ship just takes off and starts launching missile attacks on UEO targets. And they talk to SeaQuest about it, because for one thing, the sub is calling out the name Bridger periodically. And also Bridger figures out that the sub is reenacting an old war games exercise that Bridger was a part of several years ago. And then, even more than that, when they start to tangle with the sub, they realize that the program that was downloaded into the sub was an AI version of Bridger's consciousness that he was part of some studies several years ago as well. But the download was interrupted, and that's why the sub is going haywire. It basically has, you could say, Bridger's combat skills and his tactical expertise, but not other things like his compassion. So the sub thinks that it's in the middle of an actual war and is going to launch nuclear missiles on the UEO headquarters. So Bridger has to find a way to get over to the sub and stop it. Meanwhile, we have the issue that some of the crew have families in headquarters. Particularly, we see Piccolo talking to his aunt and his cousin. And when they learn that the headquarters are threatened, he wants to send a message to them. Bridger says no. For one, that would cause a panic. And two, it's not fair. We get to tell our families, but all the civilians there are basically just stuck. So one of the scenes I liked on this plotline is that Piccolo and Lewis are in their quarters, and Piccolo's trying to talk Lucas into helping him, and Lucas is like, no, Bridger said this is wrong. I'm going to do what he said. So you can tell that he's really torn about it, but eventually, he changes his mind and decides to help. But the news has already gotten out somehow, and as they suspected, there's a bunch of panic. The shelters are already full, and nobody can get out. So we have that one aspect of the drama going on. Then you have finally Bridger goes over to the other sub and basically has this conversation with himself. Say that you're incomplete. That because one of the things that he makes the connection is the sub version of his consciousness doesn't know that his son died. So that when Bridger explains that to him, it really affects him. And you realize that he's incomplete. So Bridger basically connects with him and finishes the download. And this is what finally convinces the submarine to self-destruct the missiles shortly before they get to their target.
I really enjoyed that resolution, because when you think about the fact that this sub is based on Bridger's mind, it makes a lot of sense that in order for him to get from where he was, very kind of the war focus, which they talked about that in season 1, in the very first episode, when you talk about when he was talking to his protege, the lady who kind of went crazy. She's like, who are you? This isn't who you used to be. You taught me to win. And, Bridger talks about how he's not that person anymore. And so here we get to see who Bridger was before his son died. And the resolution was, since this is literally me from back then, I have to bring him through the events that brought me to the me to now. And once he walked the computer version of himself through those events, all of a sudden they were on the same page, because now he was the person he had become. I felt like that was a very kind of a realistic thing. Like, hey, how do I convince myself of something? Well, I have to take myself through the same process that brought me to my decision.
He even mentions that apparently about the time that he was engaged in these war games, which is about the same time as this AI version of himself was created, that apparently his son had thought about leaving the Navy, but after talking to Bridger, he decided to stay in. And it was apparently not long after that he was killed in action. So Bridger has that guilt he's carrying with him as well, which he communicates to his computer version.
Mm-hmm. I also like that in this episode, I think it was the last time we got to see W. Morgan Shepherd.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's holographic professor.
Yeah, I was sad that this was really the only time this season we got to see him. And every other time, I think there were 2 other times we saw him use the holograph face. One of them was in Vapors. And that time, it was like this Dear Abby type persona. Dressed up as some lady. And then I think the second time, it was a religious issue, and so they took on the shape of like a chaplain with the little white collar and everything. I forget which episode that one was in.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I remember it happening though.
Yeah. So I like seeing W. Morgan Shepherd again. That was neat.
I think it was the last time we saw Admiral Paris as well.
I think you're right. Yes. And then I think the reality of the situation is exactly what would happen in real life. That if politicians knew there was a nuclear blast that was 100% going to hit any city, I don't think they'd tell anyone until they got their own people out first. And the fact that's exactly what happened, that UEO politicians contacted their own family such that they could get out while the streets were clear and then screw everyone else over. I think that's what would have happened. And props to SeaQuest for having the gumption to actually show that kind of depiction on TV. Now, obviously, everyone lived. Bridger saved the day. AI Bridger, shut things down and then blew himself up, I want to say.
Yes. There's a funny scene when, I thought it was funny, when Piccolo's family was at the outside the shelter trying to get in, and they think their time is up. So the aunt says, no matter whatever things I may have said to you before, just remember that I love you. So the daughter says, so you're not really planning to sell me to the University for Scientific Research? It says, no, of course not permanently.
That was a fun thing, seeing Piccolo talk to his family, and just the, at the end we see that niece again, or cousin of Piccolo's, trying to say which mugshot of yours should we use, like the mugshot of when you punched your commanding officer, or the mugshot of when you stole something, and like that's the best photos they have of Piccolo. And then the deal he made with his aunt, I think at the beginning of the episode, was she would continue to not tell his uncle where he was. And like,
Yes, his uncle Polly, by the way.
Yeah, so apparently that was enough motivation for him to, I forget what it was, buy the cousin a hat or do something for the aunt, something silly like that. But just kind of the whole idea that everyone in Piccolo's family aren't bad people. They're just unique individuals, you know. I like seeing that side of Piccolo.
Yeah, they have a loose relationship with the law.
Yes.
You could say.
Now, Thomas is wondering, John, if you might think about a video on non-humanoid aliens in Trek. Because there's a side conversation going on. Oh, God.
Yeah, I might do that at some point. Still working on the time travel as well.
That's a hefty one.
Yeah. Getting through Voyager's taking a while.
True. Yeah, that would be an interesting one, because I say everyone's talking about it started off talking about the aliens in Babylon 5, and you know, their prosthetics may have not been the best out there, which I've heard the same thing about Farscape. You know, either the prosthetics work for you or they don't. I think the practical effects they did are very good, especially over in Farscape. I mean, even Voyager with the Kazon. That was some rough hair that they gave the Kazon. Like, for the longest time, I thought it was rocks.
Yeah.
I literally thought that their species just had rock formations growing out of their head. I accepted that. I'm like, yeah, sure, they're aliens. I don't know what they're going to have. So it was a long time before I realized that they just had nasty hair. So, you know, not everyone has the same production value. With Farscape, they had a leg up. They had Jim Henson directly involved with doing their stuff. And not everyone gets that sort of treatment. Very few people get that level of expertise. Thomas is saying that SeaQuest had nothing but humanoid aliens. No?
Yeah. Well, they were basically humanoid, right?
I guess, what are we defining as humanoid? Two arms, two legs?
Yeah,
normal
I
number of
guess
heads?
so.
Because I guess I would describe the aliens that we see in what was the episode? The one with the Native American guy.
Oh, yeah, that was the same aliens from the first season.
Yes.
The Fear That Follows, I think, was the episode.
That sounds right. Yes, fear that follows. I wrote that down wrong.
The Fear That, yeah.
They were basically humans, but very pale skin and taller, and no clothes. But beyond that, humans. And then you had the Mark Hamill aliens, and I would say they weren't.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't call them humanoid. Like, they had the 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head, everything bipedal species.
Uh-huh.
But like, they definitely didn't look humanoid. They had that weird tufted hair, the teeth. But then you had the other half of the race, the non-soldiers, and they were very human. They were humanoid. But I guess in terms of humanoid species in Trek, I would count Vulcans and Romulans, sure. Would you count Klingons? Starting in TNG.
Well, I guess it depends on your definition of humanoid. I would say anyone's a humanoid if they have the same basic body structure as a human. So yes, I would include people like the Klingons, because they're like humans, just with bumps on their forehead, essentially.
So that would bring in the Andorians as well.
Yes. A non-humanoid would be something like a Horta or a Tholian,
sure.
Where completely different.
Okay. Let's see, did TNG really have any super non-humanoid? You had the creature. It was just briefly on screen too, but in the episode where you had the planet who had signed a pact with the devil in order to get 1,000 years of peace and prosperity, and then the devil shows up and briefly shows up as the Klingon devil, in which I think it was a Klingon devil, looked very much not like a humanoid. But that was very brief.
Yeah, the only thing that comes to mind for me for TNG was the episode, I believe it was called The Instance of Command, where they're dealing with a species called the Shellyak, where they look like basically kind of like that tar monster from Skin of Evil, but not exactly the same. I don't know if you know what episode I'm talking about. Data has to go down and get some colonists to leave, and they don't want to leave, while Picard is trying to keep the Shellyak from showing up.
Is that the one where the guy was just a husband and a wife duo? They were both really old.
No, that's a different one.
Okay.
This one, there's a big colony on this planet, and Data has to go down and convince them to leave before the Shellyak show up and forcibly remove them. And they talk to this one Shellyak on the view screen, and he's not really humanoid, but which is kind of unusual for TNG. That's why it stood out for me.
That episode isn't. It's not ringing a bell. Like when I think about Data going down to the planet, I think about the one where he was mistaken for the Iceman. He lost his memory, picking up the radioactive pieces. Yeah.
He eventually has to basically. They could finally convince him to leave. He takes a phaser and blows up their water system or something.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
And Picard finally gets them to back down by citing some obscure fact from this big treaty that they had signed many years ago. It's because apparently they're very legalistic, this species, and he was able to get them with their own game. And that's what finally made them back down.
Yes. Okay. Was that the one where he kept them waiting? Like they called in and like, incoming transmission, sir. And he like walks around the bridge and kind of dusts off the plaque.
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay. Well, yeah, there definitely weren't many. They were out there. I think once you could do more CGI stuff, it kind of opened up things for non-humanoid races. Enterprise had the 5 species they brought up in season 3, I want to say.
Yeah, the Xindi. Some of them.
Yeah.
They had an aquatic species which definitely weren't humanoid.
You had the insect species. I might even. Anyway. So yeah. Back to SeaQuest real quick. So number 3 of my top 3 favorites. So I did actually have the sincerest form of flattery down, and I was debating about, like, it probably would have been what I would have picked, but I want to pick a different one. So this one just barely made it onto my good list, and it was Playtime. So this was the episode that starts off with the SeaQuest is going along, and they get a distress call from a little girl. Like, what? This makes no sense. And so they follow the distress call and it takes them through what appears to be a wormhole or some sort of animation like that. And as soon as they go through it, suddenly there's nothing behind them. Like, it's not just that it's dark, it's that literally it has no mass. They try to shoot a torpedo in there at some point and it hits nothing. There's no explosion. Behind them, there is absolute nothingness. And they send a couple, boarding parties on land, trying to figure out what's going on here. They eventually find out that it is March the 25th, 2245. Or at the very least, that is the time they are given from the UEO, like, standardized clock system. So every once in a while it sends out a pulse about what time it is. So it is either that date or that's the last date, and it's just stuck repeating that. They never address that. So I'm assuming that is the current time. But by researching things, they discover that there was a global pandemic that separated people into 2 groups. Those who were naturally immune and those who died. And that was it. Like, if you caught it, you were dead unless you had natural immunity. They were never able to discover any kind of vaccine. It was just, you get it, you die. And unfortunately, despite people being naturally immune to it, they were still extremely fearful, and they locked themselves up to the point that all reproduction was artificial. Where no longer did you even come into the same space as another human for fear of being exposed and getting the disease that you were already immune to. And honestly, yes, Thomas, I have to admit, one of the reasons I like this episode so much is that despite this being 20 years old, or almost 30 now, almost 30 years old, it's a lot like COVID. There's a lot of people right now who either got the vaccine or therapeutic technically, or they caught COVID and now they have natural immunity and they're still terrified, absolutely terrified. Don't want to leave their room, don't want to leave their house, afraid to open the windows. You know, I know people like this, and the fact that SeaQuest was able to create an episode of, just generic coverage and have it still be relevant really made it stand out. I feel like that is great sci-fi writing, to leave it open like that, such that you can really find, parallels throughout history. So the way they're able to make this all work is that there's a centralized global computer network, and this computer is practically sentient. It is sentient, quite honestly. And what it was able to do is realize that we are down to the last two. Somehow it's like the last terminal for this distributed computer system, and it was able to activate the last two humans in the last breeding facility on the planet. And they've grown up. They're now like not early teens, excuse me, that'd be gross. Early 20s, late teens, somewhere in that range. And they've never even come into contact with each other. They spend their whole time playing video games, either completely immersive ones where they're literally walking around in these giant mech suits, or just handheld ones, like the old. Gosh, if you didn't grow up at this time, I'm not sure how to explain it to you, but it was literally like you'd have a D-pad and a button, and an LCD screen, and all the positions of your characters were already burned into the screen, and depending on what you did, like your bat, like it'd be baseball, and your bat would go from here and then light up over here, and then like you'd have the guy running down, and it'd just be him running back and forth. So I mean, very low level stuff, but it's what I grew up on. I thought it was pretty amazing. So this is how they spend their time. They're literally afraid to come in contact with each other, and as a result, we find out that the machine wants to be terminated, and it knows that whoever disconnects it has to come from a time period from before it existed, because anyone after it came into existence would be so dependent on it that they couldn't accept the freedom that destroying the computer would give them. They'd be locked into it existing. So they had to pick someone from the past before it existed. And so Lewis has to disable it in order to get the timeline going again, because they address the idea that time is like a Mobius strip, that eventually it rewinds to itself. And they're literally looking at Adam and Eve. And until they resolve the situation with Adam and Eve, there's no past to go back to. And that's why there's nothing behind them, because time has been disconnected and the Mobius strip is like flapping out in the wind. And unless they resolve the time paradox, they're stuck. So they resolve the time paradox thanks to Darwin. Playing with Darwin,
of course,
gets them to interact. And then the final step is to disable the computer system. And by disabling the computer system, it forces them to deal with reality instead of locking themselves up in this manufactured existence. So I like the episode. It wasn't their strongest episode. There was a lot of there were issues with it. Like literally, there was a minute and a half of screen time where they kept showing the mech suits almost firing. Like it's the same shot over and over and over again. Like they'd zoom in and the mech would raise its gun, and they'd zoom in and the mech would raise its gun from a different angle, and then Lewis came in and a third mech, and they both reacted. And I'm like, okay. I get I get that CGI is hard. It's 1993. The fact they got this far was impressive for a TV show, but it was bad. And then the idea that the Mobius idea, it didn't quite pan out the way they were thinking, because that means the world ends on March the 25th, 2245, at which point time loops back to itself, and they become Adam and Eve, and all this advanced civilization stuff just vanishes over the next 1,000 years, which I mean, yes, I'd understand that there'd be some stuff in ruins, but you'd think that we'd be able to find some proof of this existence. And at the same time, they're also trying to pull evolution into this. And it's like, wait, if time is cyclical, how do you pull in an old Earth at the same time? So look, there were flaws, but I really enjoyed the plot idea. The global pandemic, the fear that such a pandemic would bring, and the fact that they were able to predict how fearful people would be in the face of a pandemic like this is really amazing. Like I wouldn't expect them to go, oh hey, a global pandemic would potentially result in people being scared to leave the home, but they did. So props to them. So that's why it made my top favorite list. So that's our 3 top favorites there. John,
good episodes.
Before we go to our negative, do you have any honorable mentions that it was really vying for it, but you decided it just didn't quite make the cut?
Well, there's a lot of episodes here I liked. So yeah, there was some that I considered throwing in. I'm trying to think what was one of them. Well, there is the episode Meltdown, which, yes, on the surface has the ridiculous premise. That's the one with the giant crocodile.
Yes.
That they thawed out from the ice. But the part I liked about it was how we got to see Ford interacting with his family, with his father and his younger brother. So I like to see how all that stuff got fleshed out there.
Mm-hmm. That was a good one. It was also the one that just barely went onto my middling list because they decided to freeze it again by blowing it up. And I'm like, wait. I could have accepted like cryogenically freezing again, dumping liquid nitrogen on it, getting it frozen, but they literally did it by launching torpedoes into a glacier and getting it buried in the ice. And I'm like, that. Whoever came up with that idea, you missed the mark. But yes, the getting to see Ford and his family was great. For my honorable mention, I went with Daggers Part 1 and 2. And the reason I did it, even though it certainly had its issues as well, it did a good job setting you up for what Season 2 is going to be. Season 2 had an extremely hard task ahead of it. It had to somehow take the SeaQuest from Season 1 and get people prepared for the more actiony aspect of Season 2, the new characters, the loss of a lot of our favorite characters, Krieg and Dr. Westphalen. That's some hard stuff to have to go through, and they did a good job bridging the gap. So even though honestly it probably could have been a single episode and still have been the exact same quality, if not better, it did a good job. And so it gets my honorable mention. And I also like that they brought back that Admiral guy who made his departure in When We Dead Awaken. And I liked it that we already knew he was scummy, and we saw him in this episode where he continues to be scummy. And not only scummy, but we also find out that, maybe he was a bit of a traitor. And I don't necessarily judge him for that. They talk about how he was taken to a POW camp. He was in a situation where he was going to be tortured, and he cracked to the torture, it appears. Or maybe he even cracked to the threat of torture, which would be, a step worse. But I've never been in that situation, and I'm not going to judge someone who faced with it cracks. But at the same time, like they built up this personality for who he was, and I feel like this episode did a good job continuing that and leading right into who he became in When We Dead Awaken, and just kind of gave him. It was a good middle episode that really made a good arc for who his character was. As he came in, we see him develop, and then he eventually went out. So that was my episode, my honorable mention.
Yeah, Ervik says he liked the episode Alone.
You know, that wasn't a bad one. That was the psychic avatar. He was comatose. It wasn't a bad one. It didn't make my good list, but it didn't make my bad list either. It was just a middle episode, and at the very least, it was nice that we could get an episode that focused on B'Elanna Troi and it not be a dumpster fire. I don't know if I could say that about many Troi-centric episodes.
At the beginning of the season, we kind of bagged on her a lot, but when she did have an episode that focused on her, it really wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
And it's much better than a Troi episode, I think.
Yeah. Like Two Eyes. Oh, how's it go? Two Eyes circling in the dark, or Two Moons?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
I try not to remember.
Thomas is saying that he liked the Ghost Ship episode. Why aren't we talking about it? Well, it was season 1. That's why we're not talking about it, Thomas. We're talking about season 2 right now. So what was your worst picked episode?
The one I put at the bottom was Watergate. In that episode, SeaQuest is escorting this singer who, since it's apparently a hippie and doesn't want to fly because it would disrupt the birds, although she doesn't have a problem with fish apparently. But in the meantime, there's some ancient structure that turns out to be a pyramid of some type, and somehow it's affecting the singer as well as Henderson. So there's this little ancient Greek, we find out, love triangle being set up, and to make a long story short, they go inside this structure and they find apparently the actual god Neptune under there, and then there's also the spirit of one of the goddesses. I think was it Athena? I don't remember. No, it wasn't Athena because they were Minerva.
Yeah.
Yes, that's another nitpick. They're talking about the Greek gods, but using the Roman names. That kind of annoyed me. But yeah, so they reunite that. So SeaQuest reunites this god and this goddess
by blowing up her statue.
Yes, exactly. And then they just cruise off, and this singer has her cheesy concert.
Yes. Yes, that was an episode. I don't.
Yep.
I don't have anything really great to say about that episode either. The one good thing, and I already said this, was Ortiz rejected Henderson when she threw herself at him because she was under the influence of Medusa. Ortiz said, "No, we're not doing this. This is inappropriate. I respect you too much," and he left. So I did like that scene, but beyond that, I mean, I think that was the episode that may have hurt my brain the most, simply from the scientific aspect. They talked about how if you cut away all the rock, you can find a pyramid. I'm like, well, this is a stupid statement. I can take any mountain and make a pyramid out of it if I cut away the rock. And then they had things where they said, like, the material it was made out of predates the universe. Not just older than the Earth, but it's like older than anything. And that was a pretty dumb statement to make, because you have to. That's not how radiometric dating works. Not at all. It predates time. That's what they said. It predates time. And then they also said that a pyramid, or specifically they said cones, don't form in nature. And that was kind of a hit the head on the table moment, because that is exactly what forms in nature. Like if you have sand and you just drop it, it naturally forms a cone. which is, just kind of a pyramid that's a little lazy. If a cone was any more industrious, it would be a pyramid. So yeah, that no love for me for that episode. But it wasn't my least favorite. My least favorite, it's a toss-up. My two least favorites were the ones about the supernatural. That was Sympathy for the Deep, in which they were able to use this psychic device to make people better, and then it absorbed too much negative energy and started to make everyone hallucinate and go insane. That one wasn't too great, but at the very least, it was decent enough. Yeah, mainly because you got a hint from the first moment. Like the episode opens up, there's a guy running down the hallway and he's being chased by a mob, and he gets to his door and he's like, I got this laser gun, I'm gonna use it to defend myself. And you hear people slamming on the door, and then the wife, it cuts to her, she's right next to him, but like when the camera focuses on her, when you watch through again, you suddenly realize that there's no more sounds in the mob, and he's hallucinating the whole thing. So every time it focused on her, the sound of the pounding door stopped. The sound of the people yelling just outside your active hearing stopped. And so for that reason, it barely wins out against my absolute least favorite episode of the season, and that was Something in the Air. And Something in the Air, I mentioned it very, very briefly, but it's the one where they have a random group of people and none of them remember who their characters are anymore. That's one where O'Neill all of a sudden just doesn't know any languages. So you had B'Elanna Troy, you had Ford, you had O'Neill, and then you had a random priest, and then two scientists. And they brought this box onto a secret underwater sea station to open it up because the contents of this box are going to change everything. All our knowledge is somehow going to be fundamentally altered by what's in this box. Where did they get the box? You don't know. They never address it. What did they think was going to be in the box? You don't know. They never address it. They set up the mystery box, which I know J.J. Abrams likes tremendously, but then they never tied it in any way. It existed and then it was gone. The only point of it was it had Set, and in this episode, Set is a demon in all of religion, which he isn't. He's not. Like, the only time you talk about Set, and it wasn't the religious guy talking about this. They had a priest who said nothing religious the entire episode. But they did have O'Neill, so at least that part was good. O'Neill continued his knowledge of religion. But O'Neill is like, oh yeah, in every major religion, Set is a demon. Except he's not in Christianity at all.
Nope.
I don't know Islam abundantly well, but I don't think he exists in Islam. I know he exists in the Egyptian religion, but he's not a demon in it. So you had that. The demon escapes, takes over Ford briefly, who kills one of the lady scientists, red shirt people. And then he takes over the other scientist lady. And such in the end, the last scientist, who wasn't a part of the SeaQuest crew, he takes the box with him into a vacuum chamber. Or into, not a vacuum chamber, but into the airlock. Because you find out that the way they got him into this box was somehow they created a vacuum and the demon was forced into the box. And so that's how they sealed this demon in ancient times. So that's what they do again. You get a good scene. I'll give it props for this. You get this great scene where the guy has already chosen to sacrifice himself. And he calls up his ex-wife or estranged wife, whatever it is. And he tries to apologize to her because he realizes that he was distant and that's what ruined their marriage. And she's just like, this isn't a good time. We'll talk about it next week. And so you really feel for the guy, that he recognizes how badly he messed up. And he knows that he's about to sacrifice himself. And he knows that his death could weigh on his family. So he wants to resolve things with them. Not so that he dies with a clear conscience, but because he doesn't want them to be burdened with it. And I felt like that was really, really great for this character. It made for a good moving scene. But beyond that, like, the whole episode made no sense. It made no sense why the small amount of text that they had to take 24 hours to be translated. Like they talked about how they had to send this text off to this lab and a computer would translate it. But for some reason, the translation would take 24 hours. It's like, why? Even if you're sending this as a JPEG image, 1 pixel at a time, it shouldn't take 24 hours to get a translation on what this is. O'Neill not knowing languages all of a sudden made no sense. Just so much of the episode made no sense. And then anytime SeaQuest went super paranormal, it wasn't exactly their strongest episode. Sorry, Thomas. I know you like the ghost ship. At least the ghost ship had some good elements to it. Like our favorite shanty guy. I can't think of his Crocker. Yes. Great stuff from him. But this episode didn't even have that, unfortunately. So that was my least favorite episode from season 2. And then we're still talking about production quality versus how well something turns out. I haven't been able to follow the conversation too well as we talked about this. But I think... See, Professor's talking about scripts being changed. Yeah, that does happen. I know season 1 that happened a lot of TNG, where a script would come in and then Roddenberry would just gut it and like take the bare bones of it and just completely change it up. So even if you got a good writer, it wouldn't necessarily mean you got a good script. It could get very much changed to the point that there was a couple episodes where I want to say. No, I'm thinking of TOS even. The City on the Edge of Forever. The writer did not want his name associated with that episode. Because it was so fundamentally different from what he had written it as.
Yeah, I think that the main point of the discussion is still the idea of variety of alien species in Star Trek. And how doing like non-humanoid species on a regular basis just isn't practical on a TV show, because not only is their budget, just they may not have time because they're cranking out a lot of these episodes in a season, and even just doing the prosthetics on the face takes hours and hours to put on and take off.
Yeah, I was gonna say I know that for DS9, all the Ferengi characters would meet the night before the shot, and they'd come with their prosthetics on. Like it wouldn't be fully done. They just have the mask that they wear and the teeth, and they'd go over the lines, because once it came time to do their scene, it was so difficult to be fully in their get-up with everything painted on the way it's supposed to, glued down and stuff, that they wanted to do it right the first time. And yeah, it's a real hurdle, and that's just basic prosthetics. I remember Odo. He literally had to like peel that face mask off at the end of the day because it was just so sweaty in there.
He had to drink his lunch through a straw or something because he couldn't take the mask off while they were filming. It's a full face thing.
Yeah, and who was it? O'Brien's character, the actor who played him, complained the one episode where he had to put on Klingon makeup, because it took him like 2 or 3 hours just to do the basic Klingon makeup. And he's like, oh, this is horrible. Meanwhile, you got Michael Dorn, who's like, yeah, welcome to my life. Suck it up, Buttercup.
Yeah.
So yeah, I certainly understand why there's not... I understand why Spock was just ears. Like, that's boom, quick, done. I understand why Jadzia was just spots. That might take a while to put on, but it's at least not oppressive once it is on. You really don't, and Kira just a little nose ridge. You don't want to have your main actors having to go through a lot of prosthetics every time they're in a shot, because that just drastically increases the production time.
And people like Terry Farrell in particular, I read that she was very sensitive. She couldn't even handle like the heavy duty makeup, which is why, for example, she never appeared as a Klingon, or they didn't want her outside in the sun for too long because she just couldn't handle it. So they gave her relatively simple makeup.
Sorry, I was sneezing when you said that. Who was it?
Terry Farrell. Apparently she had very sensitive skin. She couldn't handle the big prosthetics or even being out in the sun too long. The trailers used to have a different makeup, but they changed it into something that was more simple, just like I said, just spots, as opposed to actual prosthetics.
And let's see, Super Plus is saying that changing writers in sci-fi would help a variety of types of aliens, so you don't get mostly humanoids. I contend that cost and practicality is what prevents it. I'd probably lean toward cost and practicality too. I mean, you might have that one writer out there who just loves the prosthetics. But I think at the end of the day, a lot of it does come down to cost and practicality. And talking about people being sensitive, on Farscape, Zahn's character, the blue lady, the reason she left Farscape was because it was interfering with her health. Being painted blue like that, even when they just did it, on the visible parts of her body, took such a long time that it dramatically impacted her health. And when she started to go through cancer, she was literally dying from having the makeup put on because she wasn't able to give the cancer the focus it needed because it took so much time. Like she had to show up hours before anyone else. And Dargo had tentacles all over him, and yet somehow the putting on the tentacle get up and doing the little bit of attaching it there took less time than painting Zahn blue, which is incredible to think about. And that goes to show how good some prosthetics are. Like Jim Henson did a great job of making these prosthetics. So that it only took Dargo a couple hours to get into his makeup, but it took Zahn just hours and hours and hours and hours every day that she did the shooting. It's definitely not just a writer issue. There's a lot of cost and practicality to it, which I'd also say is why for Star Trek we see so many non-humanoid and prosthetic type aliens in the movies, more so than the episodes. Like an episode, you have 7 days, typically. I guess that's traditional. Traditionally, you had not even 7 days, because if you did exactly 7 days, there wouldn't be enough time to do all the post work. So you had a lot of a very reduced time frame, and you had to get it done. So you either couldn't focus them, or you had to keep it very simple. And Thomas,
they stopped stalling. Get to Darwin.
Okay, Darwin moment. John, what was your favorite Darwin moment?
Well, I have several, but in no particular order. I tried to whittle it down to three. One of them was from the episode Vapors.
Yes.
In the early part of that episode, Lucas is trying to explain to Darwin the concept of money. For example, if you do something, and then you'll get fish for it. So that's like your payment. So then later in the episode, Bridger's going to be having a party at his house, and he's trying to get Darwin to help him set up some decorations. So he asks Darwin to go set up these lights or something. Darwin says, "How much?" What do you mean how much? How much what? How much money? Says Darwin, "Who taught you that?" It was Lucas. Fine, I'll do it myself.
That was a good one. And Silver's saying he didn't say it was only a writer issue. Okay, I believe you. Like I said, I glanced over, so I don't know the entirety of the chat, man. That's just my hot 2 cents on it. One of my favorites, obviously, Darwin getting arrested. The fear that follows.
Of course, you were like that.
Just fantastic. Finally getting what's coming to him. That dolphin.
Shameful.
And obviously, that was the episode where the season 1 aliens come back, and somehow you have this very, very hawkish character, just ready for war, ready for a fight, believes that everyone operates on fear, he says at one point. But he's able to find out that there's a message being sent to Darwin. And I forget how he figured it out. I forget if they even addressed it. But somehow he knew that Darwin was the intended recipient, and that he was leaking information to aliens. And so they arrested Darwin, and obviously he was cleared. Obviously, yes. In fact, ended up being quite instrumental for the rest of the episode. But yeah, that's one of my favorite. What was one of your other ones?
Another one I had was from the episode Sincerest Form of Flattery, which we talked about earlier. One of the things that the Bridger sub does is he tricks the SeaQuest, and they get stuck with this nuclear mine that's on this countdown. Obviously, it will destroy the SeaQuest if it goes off. And they're trying to disarm it, but they're frantically trying to figure out what kind of code would Bridger of several years ago have programmed into his bomb. And while they're basically tearing their hair out, trying to figure out what to do, all of a sudden in the background, Darwin starts rattling off a string of numbers. And he repeats it a few times. It's like, what? How do you know that those are Bridger's favorite numbers? He says, well, he has this black box he says them to every morning. So apparently Darwin can see into Bridger's quarters, and that's the combination for his safe, and he's able to hear it. So he, of course, being a clever dolphin, he remembered that and repeated it back at the key time, so they're able to disarm the bomb before it goes off.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. One of my second one would have to be one of the few times it was really allowed to be useful in this season is when he told Bridger off in The Fear That Follows. Sympathy for the Deep. And that was the episode where you had the psychic device that had absorbed all the negative energy, and then it was being released back out. And the process of releasing it back out had made everyone hallucinate. Everyone was on edge. In fact, one of the good things they did in this episode was talking about the difference between, is a person accountable for the actions that they do, the evil actions, or is a person a victim of their societal pressures? Are they driven to evil? And the good thing they do about this is they examine the issue, and then they never make a conclusion. They leave it. They present both sides of the kind of argument, as you will, and then just leave it there, which is what I think Sci-Fi should do. But as they're going over this, and Blonde Troy, she reveals that everyone aboard SeaQuest now has a psychiatric profile of a sociopath. Like, she takes some brain scans, which she wasn't supposed to do, but she did it because she realizes that everyone is giving in to their darkest wishes. So one of her darkest wishes was using her psychic powers however the heck she wanted to. Bridger is being very aggressive, authoritarian, because that's kind of his dark wish, resorting back to who he was, or reverting back to who he was, that very hawkish individual. And Darwin tells him off, and he's like, I'm scared. And Bridger's like, yeah, you should be scared. There's a lot of people doing some dumb stuff. And, Darwin goes, no, of you. You're the one who's scaring me. And from that interaction, Bridger's able to get a moment of clarity, put the dots together. So I felt like that was actually a moment where Darwin wasn't just, in the background, but actually taking an active role in the episode.
It's a good one.
So you said you whittled it down to 3. What's your third?
Well, my third one was from the episode Dead End, where SeaQuest is searching for their crew that's missing. They got pulled into the tunnel, and Darwin knows that something's wrong. He wants to go out and look for them, but Bridger's worried that something could happen to Darwin because they don't know what's going on. So Bridger tries to tell him that this is dangerous. You sure you want to do this? So the Darwin response is, Darwin not afraid. Darwin famous shark fighter. I just thought it was hilarious. I'm trying to picture Darwin fighting with a shark. It's too bad we never got that scene.
And in this corner, coming in at 240 pounds, the great shark fighter Darwin.
So of course, then they send him out, and eventually he's the one that locates the area of the water where the salt's different, and that leads them to rescuing them, and so on and so forth.
Yes. So my final Darwin moment is going to have to be his classic role of giving the information to the poor dumb humans without really giving them the information. And that was in the episode By Any Other Name, which was also the Little Shop of Horrors underwater episode, where they come aboard a abandoned station, and they've been doing this botanical research, but everyone's gone. Where is everyone? Well, it turns out that they had gone where man was not meant to tread and created these carnivorous plants. And for some reason Henderson brings some of the plants back to the SeaQuest. She's like, oh, this is a pretty flower, brings it, and very foolishly should have obeyed quarantine, but she's new. She's very wet behind the ears still. But Darwin, he figures it out. He knows something's come up, because remember, he can see the future. So he stops speaking and eating. And the way that they finally figure it out is they increase the color of light to 5,000 Kelvin, which is a more natural daylight color, as opposed to the 4,000 or 3,200 most people have, which is the old yellow incandescent color. And so by doing that, then the plant aboard the SeaQuest, it makes its way to the Moon Bay area where Darwin is, and it instantly dies in the light. And they go, oh, the plant can't survive natural sunlight. If we get it up to the right color, it dies. And so they open up all the windows aboard the SeaQuest, and the sunlight comes in at dawn, and they do the same thing over on the station. So Darwin saves the day without letting them know, because Darwin knows what's going on. He's just humoring them the whole time.
Yes, he's their humble savior.
Well, do you have any final thoughts for season 2?
Well, the only other thing I had to bring up was my mystery category, which relates to those things at the beginning. And my mystery category was favorite moments when Dagwood doesn't understand how food works. And one of them was, for example,
if you could repeat that one more time. It appears that we had a momentary glitch over on YouTube. I see it spinning over there. All right, someone over on YouTube. We live? Yeah, it looks like we're live now.
You good now? Okay.
It looks like maybe it was just on my end, but it looks like some hand motions that coming through. Yep. Okay, we're good. We're good.
Okay, so yeah, my mystery category was favorite moments when Dagwood doesn't understand how food works, because you can often see him in the background while other characters are talking or doing something, then quizzically looking at some food and not really sure how he's supposed to eat it. There was one episode that's along these lines where Piccolo has a corn dog and somehow he's not supposed to have it, so he gives it to Dagwood, and Dagwood spends the rest of the episode with the corn dog just sticking out of his pocket as he's going about the ship doing his various things.
That was Meltdown.
I wasn't sure which episode it was, but yeah. There was another time where they're in the mess hall or whatever, and he's got a banana. He's kind of turning around and looking at it from different angles. So with the peel still on, of course. So finally he picks it up like lengthwise and takes a bite right out of the middle.
Yes, and just before that, he was struggling with a pineapple.
Well, yeah, that's the
I'm
next
pretty sure
one
that was the same. I think that was the same scene where they're all in the mess hall, and he I think it was Brody is like, is anyone gonna help Dagwood out? He's been staring at that pineapple for like 5 minutes, and
so
like,
don't eat the part that hurts your mouth.
Okay.
Okay. Bites right into the shell.
You have to wonder, like, was that Peter DeLuise who played Dagwood, or?
I think so. Yes.
You have to wonder if in real life if he could do that, or if they specifically had like a prop pineapple, or if he's like, yeah, I can just bite into this and cut away the camera, I'll spit it out real quick, sort of thing.
I'm not sure. Maybe.
I have no idea either, but you gotta wonder, because I could totally see him being like, oh yeah, I got this hilarious thing, and they're like, yeah, okay, do it. We'll just have you doing it in the background. Those are the three that I remember as well. I don't recall.
There were probably other stuff along those lines, but yeah, those are the ones that stood out to me.
Well, that was a good mystery category. Thank you, John.
My pleasure.
Well, any other final thoughts for season 2?
I think we pretty much covered it.
I think so. It was a good season. It lacked that spark season 1 had, but if this had been season 1 of SeaQuest, I think I would have been okay with it still. Like, it still would have been engaging. I would have recognized it as a action sci-fi show, and I would have had no problem with that. I think the only reason it was an issue is because it was such a departure from season 1. Plus, it had half the cast replaced, and those two things really made it a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. And there's going to be some more changes when we start on season 3.
There is. And with that, guys, next week, we will be doing this for season 3, episode 1, barring unforeseen, divine intervention things. So thanks for joining us for season 1, for season 3, episode 1, season 3 next week.
And just a note, sorry, I just want to say real quick, if you're watching it on Peacock, season 3 actually is listed under a different name. Instead of SeaQuest DSV, it's listed as SeaQuest 2032. Because they rebranded as that for the 3rd season.
That is good knowledge, because when we first started doing this, beginning of this year, I want to say, they had it all under the one category. So, I mean, it was 2032, but at the time, Peacock just said, oh, here's season 1, season 2, season 3 of SeaQuest. So it sounds like they've split it apart now.
Yeah, last I checked, it was split up. So in case anybody's looking for season 3, it's listed separately.
Good to know. All right, guys, thanks for joining us, and we will see you next week for season 3, episode 1, which, let's see if I can do my prediction here.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
There we go. Can't forget this part. We gotta know how wrong I'm going to be next week. Okay, so season 3, episode 1 is called The Awakening, and I think what's going to happen in this episode is that, as you recall, they are stranded on an alien planet. So I think what they're going to have to do is go and wake up some of the locals to help them get back to Earth. And I'm even going to go out on a limb here and say that the way this happens is by Lewis tapping into his latent psychic energy. So he awakens to the fact that he has some psychic abilities, and he uses this to track down and also wake up the native aliens aboard this planet, and they're able to work together to find the missing members of SeaQuest and build a ship that will get them back to Earth by the end of the episode. There you go. How's that for I'm undoubtedly wrong. Yes, for next week.
Well, guess what? Tune in next week and find out how wrong Matthew is this time.
It's true. So tune in next week, same bat channel, same bat time, 9:30 p.m. U.S. Central Daylight Savings Time, and we will have fun watching season 3, episode 1 of SeaQuest, DSV 2032, The Awakening. Y'all guys take care.
Good night.
Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to hit that like button and share it with your friends. If you haven't subscribed yet, I hope you will, and be sure to hit that bell icon to be notified of all the updates I do on this channel. If you want to support the work I'm doing here, then I hope you'll consider becoming one of my Patreons, where you'll get early access to all kinds of videos. And until the next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.